You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. We were off last week for, of course, the big Futures Industry Association conference. I was down in their southern studio for most of the week, but back now in the Chi-Town studio, back once again to roll out the old crypto rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. You want to hear a fun breakdown about everything that was going on down there in FIA? You want to get pro Q&As? Got an awesome one coming up, very crypto-centric this week. We'll be joined by our good pal, Mr. Bill, frequent guest on this program. I got to imagine a lot of the questions coming his way are going to be on the crypto side of the fence. So if you want to join that partay, only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Of course, you get options oddities as well. That one's been quite the banger of late. Have some UVIX fun going on in there. Quantum straddles and trades out there. A lot of fun on options oddities, as well as, of course, giveaways, all sorts of cool stuff, live streams, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Man, we're already halfway to giving away the March Pro. I seem like I just gave away the February one. You folks are cleaning me out. Already looking towards the March one. Get your name in the hat, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. The place to go to learn more as we learn who's joining us on the old crypto rundown this week. I'm pleased to welcome back our old pal, Mr. Greg Magadini, the director of derivatives over there at Amberdata, joining us today via the magic of telephone from an undisclosed location. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you so much, Mark. Happy to be here. The undisclosed location is Scottsdale, Arizona today.
Ooh, sexy place this time of year. What brings you down there, sir?
Just exploring. I've actually never been out here before, so do a little bit of work from a new place and get a new sense of the vibe out here. Very interesting. Nice warm weather. Definitely love that.
Yeah, good time of year to be down there. You don't want to be there in like June or July or August because then it's a little bit of an oven. But this time of year, a good time to be exploring the Southwest as we explore a little bit of the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for The Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the big dog, which is Bitcoin. Of course, going back to our last show a couple of weeks ago, we are seeing Bitcoin a wee bit lower than it was on that show. On that show, we were barely north of 87,000 the last time we gathered here together. 87,059 to be precise. Kicking off the show today, we're at 84,321, down not quite 3,000 handles. We're pretty darn close, 2738 to be precise. So a lot to unpack. But before we get into all the vol and the skew and everything else, Mr. Greg, obviously a lot been going on in the big dog, aka BTC. What's been catching your eye out there of late, sir?
Yeah, I think one of the main themes that we got to keep in mind here is that we're getting a lot of sort of reflexes from the overall macro market. Bitcoin has been sort of a new administration trade in a lot of ways. And so we've seen the tariffs, we've seen a lot of headwinds for risk assets in general. And so to me, that's going to be a drag on the crypto market and Bitcoin specifically. And really the levels that I'm looking at, to me right now, we're a little bit into figuring out where we're going, no man's land, so to speak. But the really big level that I think is to the downside would be, where did Bitcoin rally from on election night? So that's kind of the low 70s, high 60s, something we call a Bart Simpson pattern in crypto, where you have a mega rally up, kind of consolidation sideways, and then an equal sort of sell-off down. So if we see any sort of weakness in macro or risk assets as a whole, I think that translates to weakness in Bitcoin.
Yeah, we've seen a lot going on since the last time you joined us back in February, Mr. Greg, including all this fun, all this debate about the big strategic Bitcoin and indeed crypto reserve, sir. We saw a rally off that, then it was kind of short-lived, kind of came back down the other side pretty quickly. We had a question of the week about that. I'll get to the results of that in a second. But in general, sir, what are your thoughts on the short-lived rally we saw on the back of the whole crypto reserve, sir, and maybe its impact for the future?
Yeah, the way that I think about that is, in a lot of ways, people thought it was disappointing because they were expecting, fresh tax dollars buying Bitcoin, which, I'm glad that that's not necessarily the case. I think that could be controversial. So the Bitcoin reserve is really going to be holding existing Bitcoin that has been seized by the federal government for illegal activities. But it's still a very bullish headline. The fact that, the government is going to be holding billions of dollars of Bitcoin and essentially starting a strategic reserve is 2 years ago, that would have been as bullish as it gets. And the fact that the market instantly stated that good news, that doesn't seem like a very promising sort of trend.
Yeah, it was an interesting development. We asked our audience that week. We said, hey, do we need, I think it was actually about a week later, where we asked, do we need a strategic crypto reserve? We got answers all over the place, Greg, but at the end of the day, exactly 2/3 of our audience, 66.7%, said hell no, and about exactly a third said heck yes. We got a lot of people chiming in. Well, we're not buying strategic NVIDIA or AMD or Apple reserves, so why are we buying strategic crypto reserves? A lot along those lines, Mr. Greg. I think you're right. I think it did calm some people that it was assets that were already seized. Still interesting stuff. What are your thoughts, Greg, that 2/3 of our audience coming down on the negative side, sir?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's there's an argument to be made that, if we own gold, should we own digital gold? I think that's a logical argument, but there's just as valid of an argument as, well, why pick one asset over another if we're going to be allocating strategic reserve assets? Oil makes a lot of sense because there's energy needs, and if we're ever stuck in a military conflict and we need to power tanks and planes and stuff like that, that seems strategic. But some sort of asset such as Bitcoin versus NVIDIA, yeah, why pick one over the other, I think is an equally valid argument. So I understand the sentiment for sure.
Let's get out there, see what's popping off in the world of BTC from a vol and skew perspective. Member listeners, if you want to do a deeper dive than we have time for on the show here into all these numbers and a whole bunch more, you literally have no excuse now. The GUI over there at Amberdata completely free. You have no barrier to entry anymore to go check out all this data and a whole bunch more for yourselves. Amberdata.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. If you did that, you would see that coming into the start of the show right now on the weekly vol front, we have come in quite a bit since 2 weeks ago. Of course, that was right on the heels of a bit of that downturn we saw post-crypto reserve rally starting to fade out there. So vol was a little bit frothy. It has come in almost exactly 10 points. We were at 62 and a quarter in the weekly vol on the last show, 52.6 today. So not quite 10 points, pretty darn close. We're seeing a similar vol erosion on the 30-day front, though not quite as dramatic. 54.60 on the last show and 52.40 on the show today, listeners. And going out to where the hodlers hang out on the 6-month vol, the 180-day vol, the long-term vol, we were at a 55 and a quarter last show, actually ticking up a little bit right now, which is kind of interesting, up to about a 56 even as we kicked off the show. Mr. Greg, anything catching your eye in the world of Bitcoin vol this week?
Yeah, well, the market definitely paid through the nose for short vol recently. So as we had sort of a sell-off in SPX last week, the realized variance risk premium really favored vol buyers. And so if you look at some of our charts, we can see sort of the distribution really favoring vol buyers. So that's kind of interesting. But I think where the opportunity really lies right now is more in the skew. I can't imagine a world where the S&P 500 resumes a downtrend, VIX goes up, and Bitcoin vol doesn't go up as prices go down. So if we look at sort of the bigger picture of Bitcoin risk reversal skew, right now it's, relatively speaking, still kind of around zero, where we've seen episodes, think about, FTX going bankrupt or Three Arrows Capital or sort of those types of events, really explode vol as prices go down. And so I could definitely see a world where that happens. And for the exception of COVID, we haven't seen a bear market in crypto while there's a bear market in traditional assets. So if that was the case, and I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, but if I was going to make a trade where I think there's something that's not being priced in, it would be sort of the own the put, short the call, and then delta hedge up on the underlying.
You mentioned seeing some opportunities in the skew. Let's go out there and see what we could find now. Let's go out to the weekly skew first. We were slightly bearish on our last show, -1.25, getting decidedly more bearish right now, almost a -3, -2.85 as we start the show. I bet if I re-racked it, it might be down around a -3 right now. Going out to the 30-day skew, same deal. We were pretty much flat on the last show, coming in to start the show today at a -2 when we kicked off the show. So once again, turning a little bit to the dark side, and even the hodlers retreating a little bit in the face of all this pessimism out there. On the last show, the 6-month skew 3.85 to the upside. This week, a little bit shy of 2.5, about 2.4 right now. So Greg, you said you're seeing the opportunities out there in the skew, sir. What's catching your eye in BTC skew this week?
Yeah, well, the long-term skew is still always the most favoring the calls. If we get into a different type of environment in terms of risk asset pessimism and bearishness, we could see that long-term skew start to be negative in terms of risk reversal, where the put's more expensive than the call. And then the short-term skew is always interesting, but that one's a little bit harder to trade because there's a lot of timing. So you could be right about an overall pullback over the next few months, but if you're trading the weekly skew, you might get the specific week wrong. And the weekly skew is pretty volatile from week to week. I could see this week we had a nice relief rally last Friday. I could see follow through this week. That's very possibly on the table. So I would say the long-term skew is a little bit more forgiving in terms of a bigger overall theme that we're trading.
I gotta tell you, Mr. Greg, our pro members right now are just reveling in their victory over me. They scooped some calls from a previous show that I was already bid for. They jumped in front of me, Mr. Greg, and they bid them up, and now those calls are about a dime bid in their favor, and I never got filled. Does that seem ungrateful to you, Mr. Greg? You know, here they are just reveling in their success while I was busy hosting and never got filled, Mr. Greg. Does that seem a little bit ungrateful to you?
On the trading floor, people get pretty mad when they get nickel and dime like that. That's for sure.
They've learned the right lessons. They've learned to cart me early and often, and then they gloat in their victory. So there you go. We're teaching them the right lessons at the end of the day, Mr. Greg. I'm just kidding. I'm glad all you folks are having a good trading day out there. You know, I'm busy talking here on the mic. I can't be babysitting my orders all the time. So you folks get the victories out there. Talking, of course, about Vodafone. If you're intrigued by that, listeners, go check out the option block. If you're one of our crypto hardcores, go check out the option block from earlier today. It'll be available. It's one of the reasons why we say listen to the full network. It'll be available there for you wherever you're getting this program. All right, let's go out now to the realm of iBit, the crypto product that has been taking the options world by storm. Is it still doing so? The answer is a resounding yes. At a 48 even when we kicked off the show, that puts it down actually exactly $1 from where it was this time on our last show. In terms of paper, this thing, like a lot of the rest of the market, is continuing to light it up, listeners. 491,000 contracts a day, nearly 500,000 contracts a day. That's up 65,000 from our last show. For a frame of reference, VIX is in explosive mode right now. They're putting up about 1.1 million contracts a day. So you're closing in on half of VIX, which is very impressive. Obviously, a beast like SPY is putting up a little bit more than that, probably 10 million. So a little bit different ball game there, but still, you're talking not too many options products that can average nearly 500,000 contracts a day. iBit certainly in rarefied territory. Today looking pretty active, a little bit north of 250,000 contracts, so probably not going to hit, 286 right now. Probably not going to hit the ADV out there today, but that's a pretty lofty number, all things considered out there. So probably good to dial back some expectations. The 30-day vol out there at a 53, down exactly a point from where it was the last time we chatted about it. And in terms of the big dog positions out there, it is the March 68s. That's an interesting position. There's 60,000 of those bad boys. Obviously, they are going the way of the dodo this week, listeners. And looks like paper started piling into a bunch of those back on February 3rd. Oh, that iBit was 57.58 at the time. They paid $1.10 for them, actually up to about $1.50 that day. So hopefully they got the heck out of Dodge. Looks like they might have a few days later bailing on some. Oh, for 55 cents. So that would not have been a good trade. Yeah, because iBit fell to about 54. So if that was the case, then there's obviously still some left on that strike, listeners, to the tune of 60 grand. Greg, anything catching your eye out there in the world of the big dog iBit, which continues to put up more paper every time we talk about it, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, that product has not disappointed. We just released, we have iBit data in our platform, so anyone who checks out the GUI can see that. But one of the things that was interesting to look at is we released a comparison of the iBit volumes versus Deribit. So last week, we saw something like $4 billion of notional trading on Deribit for Bitcoin. And then iBit was about 1.5 per day. And iBit was about 1.5 billion. So iBit's doing, between 30 and 40% of the Deribit volumes. So that's very, very good and impressive considering how recently the options were launched. And the other thing that's interesting is anyone who's been trading BitO or BitX, can see the spreads are always so wide, but iBit is a really tight market. So you can really trade flies, complex spreads and get in and get out at fair prices, which makes trading crypto vol just so nice for US investors. And then the last item here to keep in mind with iBit, the last thing that was unlocked by it was that for the first time, institutional investors can put on the basis trade. They can buy the iBit and sell the CME future against the iBit, have a delta hedged position that really captures basis. Anyone who's new to crypto would be surprised to learn that basis trades in bull markets can pay up to 30% annualized return for a delta neutral strategy. And so for someone in traditional finance who has a lower cost of capital, that's a great trade. A hedge fund who's used to making 20% per year can just put on the basis trade for a 30% annualized yield and kind of walk away. So that type of trade, I think, is pretty popular as well, and it's been likely a big source of the inflows into the ETF. So those are kind of the things that iBit has unlocked for the market and things to keep in mind. One more thing I would just like to point out, when iBit first launched its options, we had a higher priced vol surface on iBit than we did on Derebit for similar expirations and instruments. The reason why I find that surprising is what we have to keep in mind is that Derebit has future options, and there's a very strong positive correlation between the futures basis and the spot price. So as the market rallies, the basis expands. As the market sells off, the basis contracts. What that really tells you is that there's extra juice in the futures position as opposed to the underlying spot position. So theoretically, the iBit vol should be cheaper than the Derebit vol, not the other way around. So that's another kind of trade that we saw right at the open of iBit's trading. And so something else to keep in mind when you're looking at those markets, compare those two to understand if iBit is cheap, relatively speaking, or expensive, relatively speaking.
Let's keep rolling out to the land of BitO. It seemed like for a while there, the writing was on the wall, but BitO putting up some numbers today. 1875 is where BitO was trading when we started the show. Down about a third of a point from our last episode together here, listeners. And in terms of action, the ADV seems to be holding steady around 50,000 contracts a day. In fact, 49,000 contracts is unchanged from our last show. So maybe BitO has found a floor, and they're doing more than that today. 52,000 on the tape today. So BitO, a pretty active product out there today. The vol at a 43, listeners, down about 2 points from where it was on our last show. So a little bit of a discrepancy there vol-wise between BitO and iBit, which is also kind of interesting out there. Nearly a 10-point. In fact, yeah, exactly a 10-point difference between iBit and BitO vol, which is, again, kind of interesting. And looks like, if you're wondering what's driving all the flow today, listeners, looks like somebody's got a bee in their bonnet for the upside in BitO today, in particular the SEP26 calls. Someone has been blasting away at those all day. 7,900, 7,600, 58 cents, 57 cents, all prices around that 58, 57 cent level, a total of 33,000 times on the day, listeners. So that 52,000, 33K of it coming in, looks like a pretty size override of the SEP26s. These are expiring on the 30th, so end of month, September 26 calls. Interesting choice. Greg, what are your thoughts on BitO refusing to go the way of the dodo, putting up some numbers today, including what appears to be a size override of the SEP26s for nearly 60 cents? Are you down for those?
I mean, I think that's probably a pretty good sell. If anyone who's listened to the show before knows how I feel about BitO and BitX, I think those are essentially decaying assets in a way, either through dividends or through expenses or through, in the case of BitX, the 2x decay factor. So I think BitO is a really interesting instrument to sell paper against. So yeah, I definitely don't hate that.
Let's get out to a product we all know you love. It is solely for crypto degenerates. We only talk about it when Greg is on the show, listeners. If you said to yourself, you know, that MSTR, the monster, it's just not volatile. It's not exciting enough for my blood to stir my trading account to new levels. I want to go above and beyond. How about a levered MSTR? Well, that, of course, is MSTU, Greg's favorite trading product of all time, I think he said out there. Trading at a whopping $6 today. The ADV, 52,000 contracts, putting up 82,000 contracts, putting up 57,000 contracts today. So it doesn't seem like it's going to get there today. This product, of course, has seen quite a bit of erosion. And if you're wondering what the vol is out there, again, vol is kind of a strange number to talk about in these insane levered Franken products, listeners, but you're talking about a 165 vol. So again, if MSTR wasn't doing it for you, wasn't volatile enough for you, then allow me to present MSTU. Greg, what's been catching your eye out there in your degenerate product known as MSTUs?
Yes, that is definitely a degenerate product for sure. 165 all doesn't seem that crazy, relatively speaking. I've seen it in the 400s before, so that's pretty interesting. One of the things that I find striking about MSTU is that MSTR is actually one of the most liquid markets in terms of equity options. It's one of the most actively traded, like top 10 equity options, or top 15, something like that, depending on the day. And so I always kind of wonder what's the appeal of trading the MSTU besides the 2K, the 2 times payout decay factor. The 2 times payout decay is what's really interesting about ultra levered products. But if you want to be long something like MSTR 2X, it's better to just trade the MSTR bullish structure as opposed to the MSTU bullish structure. But if you're pricing in that sort of decay factor, then MSTU becomes interesting. And remember, the more volatile the asset, the more that decay factor occurs, because you're always dropping from a higher denominator and rallying from a lower denominator. So if there's more vol, that impact is bigger. And so the game that people are playing is, well, what's the implicit decay being priced into this asset? And then you could trade an opinion on that.
There you go, listeners. So if you're intrigued and you were a little bit bored with your trading account, then maybe MSTU is for you. Meanwhile, it's time for us to keep on rolling to explore the rest of the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's go explore the altcoin universe, see what's lighting up our tape out there today. And I always like kicking it off in the market cap because it always just shows us what's been going on. Is the rising tide lifting all boats, or is it sucking them all back down? On our last show, it cost you almost exactly $20 billion to break into the top 10 from a market cap perspective. That got you to good old Tron. And coming into the show today, dare I say it, it looks like we are still at that 20 billion, even though we are slightly higher. Almost 21 billion, 20.8 billion to be precise. That still gets us to everyone's favorite, good old Tron, number 10. Number 9, Cardano, 25.5 billion. Number 8, it's Doge. Doge took a little bit of a beating since our last show, still holding on to the number 8 spot, 26 billion worth of market cap. On our last show, it had over 30, about 30.6 billion listeners. Number 7, USD coin, 58.8 billion. Number 6, it's Solana, 65.5 billion, coming down, I should say, quite a bit since the last time we chatted about it. And Solana in general kind of just been trending lower of late, listeners. So if you wanted a lower level to pick up some Solana, or maybe average down, then maybe this is your huckleberry. Number 5, we got BNB, 89.25 billion. Number 4, it's XRP, 136.9, so almost 137 listeners. Number 3, it's Tether, 143.4 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, 233.6 billion, and the big dog, which is Bitcoin, 1.66 trillion with a T. But let's get out to the number 2 in the market cap, number 1 in a lot of your hearts, listeners. You know, we're talking about good old ETH out there, listeners. And it's been a rough time to be an ETH bull if you've been listening to not just this show, but of course our Futures Rundown program, where we break down the biggest gainers and losers from the year from a futures perspective. ETH has been at the number 1 or number 2 spot for much of this year. ETH has just been shedding value. That has continued since our last show, breaking through the 2K level, 2171 on our show last time, 1946 on the show this week. An interesting year, putting some bad stuff in the rearview mirror back in 1946. Is it a good level for ETH? I guess we'll find out. Greg, You know, it's been a challenging time to be an ETH bull. It's been a challenging time to be an ETH defender. Just when you think it might be making up some ground, it gives up more. What's been catching your eye in ETH since the last time we chatted, sir?
Yeah, the story behind ETH, I think, is don't fight the trend. If you just look at the technical chart of ETH versus USD, just a regular ETH price, that chart looks kind of broken in a lot of ways. Like I don't see any reason for it to go up just on a technical basis. Then if you look at the ETH versus Bitcoin chart, that's such a strong downward trend in terms of ETH prices versus Bitcoin prices. I don't see any reason to fight that downward trend. And then you have all the real reasons for ETH being essentially shedding value lately. You have the EIP 1559 sort of mechanism being not as popular as we'd hope, with the transactions being done on L2s as opposed to ETH L1. Then you have infighting in the foundation, in the ETH Foundation, which is not great. And then lastly, you have essentially sort of a meme coin, altcoin bear market. And as ETH sheds value, ETH starts to look more and more like an altcoin as opposed to a major pair. So I think all those headwinds, there's always an argument to be made that, like, okay, well, is the short side trade crowded? I don't think we're there yet, especially if we talk about risk assets as a whole. I don't see a world where risk assets are on shaky ground and ETH is the one asset just ballooning in value. So I think overall the trend is your friend in ETH. And so I would tread carefully on the long side. And in terms of vol plays, I think that's a perfect candidate for the long put, short call type of trade.
A little bit of risk reversal action out there in ETH. Well, it's hard to argue with that right now. ETH doesn't seem to be able to hold much of a bid out there. Let's see what's going on out there from a vol and skew perspective. Let's start on the vol end, listeners. Weekly vol was a little bit spicier on our last show at an 80 even. Coming in since then, 68.85 as we kicked off the show today. Going out 30 days, the vol actually literally unched. We don't see that very often in ETH, but that is the case right now. 68 on our last show, 68 even again today when we kicked off the show. And then going out to the Holdler land, 6 months, listeners, it was 63 and a quarter on our last show, 67.61. So interesting evolution across the term structure. Near dated vol coming in aggressively, at the money front month vol kind of treading water, and going out 6 months vol getting a little bit juicier. Does that surprise you, Greg, given everything you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit of the relief rally is causing that after sort of the sell-off we saw last week. But yeah, I think that's a good point. I think vol in ETH is still kind of it's not necessarily expensive, but it's just a high level. So that's why I think a risk reversal sort of position is more interesting, where you can kind of take less bet on outright vol and more bet on spot vol correlation. And we've seen spot vol correlations become a lot more negative in the past than we have right now. And I still like that theme of, if risk assets crash, I don't see a world where vol doesn't go up as crypto and ETH especially goes down as well.
Let's see what the skew is pricing in. I guess that's the question of how bearish is it right now, listeners? How bearish is the sentiment? On the weekly front, looking pretty bearish. Negative 1 3/4 on our last show. Negative 4.15 this week. So folks lean into the dark side again. Not exactly unexpected. Going to make some of those risk reversals maybe a little bit pricey. Let's see if that's the same thing going out a little bit farther, going out a month. And that is the case. We were kind of flat on the last show. Coming in to start today's show, negative 3 1/3. So again, folks saying a little bit of lookout below out there. Going out to Holdler territory, they're usually biased to the upside, but coming in a little bit out there as well. 2.15 on our last show, 1 3/4 to the upside right now. So not quite flat, but starting to threaten that territory. Mr. Greg, does all this skew info, what does that make you think about the prospect for some bearish risk reversals? Maybe some folks are beating us to it, sir.
Yeah, well, I think the market is definitely waking up to it. It's something we talked about last week in our last week's newsletter. But again, going out to holder territory and having that trade on makes a lot of sense to me, because I just think the spot vol correlation is going to be to the downside. And so even on a longer term scale, I don't see sort of those trends reversing. You might get a couple of squeeze days along the way, but I think the overall trend is going to be negative spot vol, not positive spot vol.
Well, looking at the overall trend, listeners, it also hasn't been your friend. If you're a Solana bull, on our last show, we were a little bit north of 146 and about a quarter coming in, start of the show today. A little bit shy of 129, 128.93, putting us off over 17 handles, about 17 and a third handles. Greg, it's been fascinating to watch Solana from the highest of highs around 260, getting down around 125 and even a little bit lower out there. It has been a fascinating time. Of course, that unlock has been coming due out there. That, of course, weighed on the price of Solana for a while post FTX. But in general, you're talking about the trend, Greg. The trend has been cut more than in half out there in Solana, sir. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Solana is an interesting one. I definitely get what you're saying in terms of, we've had a lot of downside bearishness. Solana to me is still more of a wild card. I could see some crazy thing happen and it just doubles again. I could see it go the other way as well. To me, Solana, if I was going to go long an altcoin, it would be Solana. I still think Solana has something to it that ETH is going to have just more headwinds, and it's kind of more structurally bearish. Solana is kind of just moving around wildly. And so even just something like when we had the announcement of the crypto summit, and then the administration or Trump tweeted about Solana as part of the reserve, and then Solana just had some crazy rally. Because Solana is a smaller market cap and it's a true sort of direct competitor to ETH, which has the larger market cap, I just think there's more potential for upside craziness in Solana than there is for, say, Ethereum.
Well, it's definitely been the case. I know a lot of our pro members have been nibbling. I did nibble a bit at some of these lower levels as well, too. I already had some Solana, so adding a little bit more. Certainly better than at 260. I'm looking here, listeners. Looks like we bottomed out during our show time last week. If we were on the show last week, I wasn't traveling to the southern studio, then we would have hit about a 114. Looks like that's the near-term low for Solana. So quite a week out there from 114 back up to 128, but obviously well off the recent highs of about 260, 261.87 to be precise. Almost exactly 2 months ago, January 18th. Man, a lot going on in the Solana world over the last 2 months, listeners. Let's run through some of the rest of the altcoin universe, and we'll get some of Greg's thoughts on whatever else he's cooking up in his wallet these days. XRP, I was talking to some folks about XRP down at the big futures conference last week. They were talking about the prospect for... speaking of which, really quickly, Greg, I've neglected to mention, since the last time you and I chatted and we had you on the show, CME has talked about launching a Solana future, sir. Does that make you any more intrigued about the prospects for Solana?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly kind of my thoughts. There's just more potential for something kind of a wild card in Solana space. Hey, maybe that CME future takes off, or maybe the CME future now is, the first step to the spot Solana ETF, and then everyone decides, hey, I'd rather own spot Solana than ETH spot, for example, and then you get like a tidal wave shift of capital from one asset to the other. There's just wild cards out there that I would prefer to own the risk reversal on Solana as opposed to Bitcoin or ETH, so to speak.
Yeah, those futures launched this morning, Greg. So some hot breaking news for us. We talked about them a few weeks ago and they announced them, but launching today, St. Patrick's Day. What better day to launch a new product in Chicago, Greg, than kicking off? So
exactly.
Listeners, does that make you perhaps more excited to dive into Solana? Is it going to be like a little bit of Bitcoin? Everyone was worried when the Bitcoin futures launched back in the day that was going to be the exit to the Roach Motel. A little bit different scenario now than it was back in 2017. These spot products are a little bit more liquid. If you wanted to get out of Solana, you obviously had your opportunity. So not quite the same thing, but nonetheless, an intriguing new addition to the Solana ecosystem. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Maybe we'll break down some of that on the Futures Rundown this week or on Twifo coming up later this week. Hopefully it puts up some numbers. We've seen the big Bitcoin, the small micro Bitcoin, and the big and small ETH over there at CME kind of struggle to gain some traction. Maybe Solana will be the one that breaks through, listeners. XRP, is it breaking through? Not quite, listeners. 244 on our show last week, 236 on our show today, down about 8 cents. And Greg's beloved Doge, 20.2 cents on our last show, 17.5 this week, so down not quite 3, about 2 3/4 cents. A Litecoin coming in as well, 111.20 on our last show, 93.18, so down about exactly 18 handles. Cardano, 88.6 cents last show, 72.4 cents. So down about a little over 16 cents, about 16.2 cents. And then Polkadot, 459 last show, 439 today. And Greg's beloved Shiba Inu, all of our pro members who are hanging out waiting for the Shiba Lambos. I can't even say it. Shiba Lambos, listeners. You're going to have another rough week because Shiba, ironically, kind of shaking off the downside, almost literally unched over the last couple of weeks out there. Greg, I know you're always cooking up a few interesting altcoin in that wallet of yours. Anything drawing some attention this week in the altcoin universe that you want to share with the folks?
No direct positions for me right now, but I think in terms of trade structures, I think, as just mentioned, Solana's kind of got the wild card. Dogecoin is more like the Elon trade. It's probably very correlated. I haven't run the numbers, but it's probably pretty correlated to how Tesla's doing, how DXYZ, the SpaceX ETF, is doing. So that's a little bit of a wild card. The X integration potential type of wild card. XRP is ever since I've been in the crypto space, it's the not favorite coin of the people in the crypto community. I'll put it diplomatically. The only reason it's rallied so hard is there's a wild card behind XRP as well. Some sort of integration or government integration or payment layer, I don't know, something like that. So there's a lot of wild card trades. Crypto beta exposure definitely still remains just Bitcoin. Everything else is kind of a little bit of the wild card play.
All right, listeners, that's going to do it for us on the wild cards this week. We got to let Greg get back to his working vacation down there in the Southeast. But a lot of interesting stuff popping off. We'll keep an eye on these Solana futures and a lot of other things out there. I see our chat talking about Shiba versus Solana. The big S debate. Which side of that debate are you on, listeners? Shiba? Are you going for the Shiba Lambos? Or are you going for the Solana wild card, as Greg puts it out there? Maybe it might be a fun little crypto question of the week. Maybe we'll put that out there for you folks. But nonetheless, that music means we are done. You can get back to your vacation, Mr. Greg. But before you do that, if folks want to check out the free GUI or your newsletter or anything else, where should they go? What should they do?
Yes, absolutely. Please go to pro.amberdata.io to look at all the volatility surfaces for all these cryptos on the various exchanges, completely free. If you want to get our weekly insights, you can go to amberdataderivatives.substack.com. And also just visit us at amberdata.io.
There you go, listeners. If you're not checking out, just at the very least, that free GUI, let alone the newsletter, all great stuff. A lot of great insights coming out in between episodes of this show that you folks should be checking out. That's going to do it for us on the network today. Back again tomorrow to hold court on more crypto fun with our buddy, Mr. Bill. So if you have questions or concerns or insights or maybe some trading products you're intrigued in, maybe you want to talk about the Solana futures, maybe you're all in on Shiba Inu, whatever the case, get those questions in now. Should be a fun one on the Pro Q&A session tomorrow. If you're not joining us in the Pro yet, what are you doing? It's a heck of a fun time, if I do say so myself. I even let you folks front run me all. How nice am I? So head on over to the Pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go to learn more. Join us again on Wednesday. That's a doubleheader listeners of this show should be checking out. You get Options Bootcamp. I know for a lot of you, these options things are still a little bit new and intimidating. Options Bootcamp will set you straight. And then, of course, the Futures Rundown. ETH's been on that show just about every week, not always in the best light. Maybe we'll have a chat about the Solana futures this week as well. So I got a feeling crypto going to be making it onto the Futures Rundown this week. Back again on Thursday, of course, for our other doubleheader, This Week in Futures Options, where we also get into some crypto, as well as, of course, the option block. Friday, Vol Views. Then we're back one final time, exclusively for the kids hanging out in the Secret Club, front-running me all day long for a little bit of options oddities. Should be a good time on that one. Then we're back again next Monday. Who's going to join us? You got to tune in to find out for the next episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.